for joining me and Mike Gualtieri for today's webinar, Use Cognitive Search to Power Personalized Digital Commerce Experiences. My name is Justin Sears, and I lead product marketing at Lucidworks. Mike Gualtieri is a principal analyst and VP at Forrester Research, and I've benefited from Mike's deep expertise and advice at my past two companies, and now again at Lucidworks. I've seen the slides, and we're in for a treat today. Mike is going to talk about how artificial intelligence is converging with customer demands for a more personalized experience. He will cover how cognitive search marries those two trends. Mike is also going to touch on the recent Forrester Wave for cognitive search, which he authored. Lucidworks was named a leader in that report, and Mike will touch on some of the reasons that our product, Lucidworks Fusion, stood out from the other 12 companies that Forrester evaluated. You can download that Wave report from the Lucidworks website. Just go to our homepage, lucidworks.com. Before I hand it over to Mike, I want to remind everyone that we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. Because of the large number of attendees, all participants are muted, but I encourage all of you to send questions in throughout Mike's presentation using the Q&A button at the bottom left of your screen on the presentation portal. I will be gathering those questions and queuing them up throughout Mike's presentation. Then he and I will answer those in the last 10 to 15 minutes. Mike Gualtieri, thank you for coming to share your insights with us today. Tell us, how can cognitive search personalize digital commerce experiences?
Thank you, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Two of my favorite subjects, cognitive search and digital commerce. Looking forward to talking to you about what this is all about and how cognitive search can power it. Let's set some business context first. We know that for the largest of enterprises, and most enterprises, right, the lifeblood is their customers. And the holy grail today is to create these customer-centric, hyper-personalized, real-time relationships, if you will. And it's really getting back to something that we used to have a long time ago. In the non-digital age, you'd walk into the corner shop, they knew your kids, they started pulling things off the shelf, they knew what you wanted. We sort of got away with that, got away from that. We're now back. And using a combination of digital technology and artificial intelligence, we can actually scale that to millions of customers. So that is sort of the backdrop of business priority and digital commerce. Now, at Forrester, we call this royalty, and really we say that customers want and increasingly expect to be treated like royalty. And what do we know about royalty? Everything. We know a lot about what they want, what they need, where they are, and thanks to the digital world, we have a lot of that information about customers as well. So thinking about a royalty experience, and especially in the digital commerce domain, we need to learn about individual customers, their characteristics, their behaviors, because then we'll know what they want, they need, the type of content they want to consume. We need to be able to detect that in real time and then adapt our digital commerce applications to serve them the content that they need to meet their goals, but also to meet the goals of the company, which is to create loyal customers and convert them. Creating those type of experiences are extraordinarily hard when you have millions of customers. How do you scale that? You can't hire enough people to get to know all of these people. Just enormously difficult to scale. And fortunately, we can do that today because we have artificial intelligence. So really hard to do it without it, and that's sort of the backdrop. And of course, the internet giants do this. This is standard course for them. But for most large organizations and e-commerce sites, it's very nascent. They're not doing it. And a lot of the reasons they're not doing it is because AI is hard to do. You can't hire enough data scientists. And that's where cognitive kinds of AI, pure and pragmatic. Pure AI is a science sci-fi stuff. That's where, we're creating robots. That's anything in Star Wars or Star Trek. That's not what we're talking about when we say AI. That's still many years away. What we're talking about is pragmatic AI. It's narrower in scope, but it often can exceed human intelligence. And scale to understand thousands of customers. And when you think of AI, it's not one particular technology. It's comprised of one or more of these building block technologies. Front and center are the data technologies. And the data technologies, machine learning and deep learning, are the technologies that cognitive search uses. So for artificial intelligence, when you think about it, no need to freeze. We're not talking about the pure AI stuff. We're talking about pragmatic AI. And of course, when you're talking about machine learning, a huge prerequisite is data. Fortunately, companies have a lot of that, and that's what cognitive search does. Cognitive search, a more formal definition, is search technology. It's a search engine, but it specifically employs artificial intelligence technologies like natural language understanding and machine learning to ingest, organize, and understand this from multiple sources. And think of the digital commerce experience. It's a content experience. So the extent that you can understand that content and personalize it, that's where you're going to get that hyper-personalized experience. And why do we call it cognitive search? Because some people might say, well, this is enterprise search. Well, this is because search has evolved to this way. When search was first invented, it was keyword search. And then it got a little bit more meaning. It was more contextual. We call it cognitive search because now it uses AI technologies. And this is exactly how Google does this, uses search as well. What does cognitive search does? It allows people to find digital content from multiple sources. People can find an answer. Generally, you think of search as returning a list of results. Many cognitive search engines can actually return one result, an answer. So instead of returning a document, think of a document that has the keywords that you typed in. Some cognitive search engines can use AI to return the answer that is contained within that document. Cognitive search is also used in large organizations to find people or match people. So in a digital commerce context, that means matching customers, understanding customers and matching them with the right content. And it powers generically many different vertical and horizontal applications, not just digital commerce. So there's many different applications here. We're going to focus on the digital commerce aspect of it. So what are we talking about here from a technology standpoint? Well, we've been doing a wave where we evaluate the vendors. We identify and evaluate the vendors in this space, the leaders, the strong performers, and the contenders and the challengers. And cognitive search, as I said before, uses those AI technology, natural language understanding, machine learning, and in some cases deep learning to understand not just textual content, but sometimes images as well. So this is the wave that we do. And we do a very detailed evaluation. And these are just some of the criteria that we use when we do that evaluation. And I'm not going to go through each of these right now, but I do want you to focus your attention on sort of the top level categories: intelligence, information, operations, security, architecture, and application. So, some people think that, evaluating a search engine is about one thing. It's not. There's many different criteria that are relevant here. Now, in the wave, we also look at the company providing this technology and their strategy and their adoption, their market presence as well. And that's all reflected in this wave document. So one of the unique characteristics about Lucidworks in particular is that they're built on open source, and in particular Apache Solr. So this is just a quote from our report with regards to Lucidworks. And open source is quite interesting in the search space, but it's fascinating in the AI space as well, because that's where a lot of the innovation is coming from. So let's look at this from a commerce point of view. Now look, retailers, whether they're completely digital retailers or whether it's a big box store and they have an online presence, they spend billions of dollars on online ads, Google, Facebook, and many other online advertising. And what are they trying to do when they do that? They're trying to, and they're using AI, to personalize those ads, right? And what they're trying to do is drive, you're paying them $100,000 a month 200,000 a month, 500,000 a month, 1 million a month to drive customers to your website. And all of that is very cool. But what happens when they get to your website? That's where you have to turn up the heat. That's where hyper-personalization, even more hyper-personalization has to take over, and that's to convert those customers and to make those loyal. So what cognitive search does is it uses natural language understanding, which is a form of machine learning, but particularly focused on text. Machine learning to understand behaviors, to understand your product catalog, to understand what specifications and images and multiple images. It also uses machine learning to predict and create characteristics for each customer. So I think you see what we're getting at here. What we're trying to do, what cognitive search does, is it uses AI to understand the content. It uses AI to understand the customer, and then it matches those. It uses AI to create the most relevant content for that interaction. Okay, and you can see on the right-hand side, it can do that through multiple channels. It doesn't, there might be a mobile channel, there might be different branded channels as well, but it does that with the content. So matching customers to the right content at the right time, that's what the goal of cognitive search into digital commerce. And doing this determines what is the content. Should the content be, we give this, a very unsophisticated view would be, oh, we know who this customer is. Let's make them an offer. Let's give them a discount. Why give them a discount? Some customers will respond to a discount. You've just given them 10% for nothing, because if you understood that customer better, instead you could display some content that would give them a nudge to actually convert, because they're not price sensitive. So a lot of rules-based systems are very unsophisticated. What cognitive search can do by matching customers with content can optimize not only their experience, but your goals, which is to convert, to create loyalty and to increase wallet share. So finding that relevant content at the right time will lead to that conversion. And you know what? Most people don't even think, this is easily understandable, right, by any digital commerce company, but most never think, oh, I should be doing that with search. But that's exactly what cognitive search can do in this context. It's also relevant for in-store engagement as well, because the content might not be displayed per se in a digital platform, but it might inform store personnel as well. So there's definitely a multi-channel play as well. So cognitive search can do this. The thing is, you have to look for a vendor platform that has the fundamental capabilities of cognitive search, but also has those capabilities oriented towards digital commerce as well. So what I would like to do now is take you through the criteria. This is more of a synopsis, a summary of the criteria we used to determine what to look for in choosing a cognitive search platform for digital commerce. So the first criteria that we use, and it's a critical one, obviously, is the information criteria. This is true with garbage in, garbage out is an old computer science adage, and it's absolutely true with cognitive search. So you have to be able to connect to the right sources. So you need platforms that can connect to all of those valuable sources. It's not just your product catalog. You have to stop thinking that digital commerce and a search content is just about searching the catalog. You have to understand customers, and you have to understand their behavior as well. So you need connections to all of those relevant data sources. And sometimes it's a lot more than you'd think. It's probably not all of these, but there's a lot more sources in order to create an intelligent digital commerce experience to connect to. So look for cognitive search platforms that can connect to these, because that data, that content, that information that is the raw fuel of cognitive search. When it comes to artificial intelligence algorithms, everyone talks about the algorithms. The algorithms are nothing about that data. So you have to have a cognitive search solution that has pre-built data and content connectors. And most of the platforms include an SDK to create custom connectors to data sources that may not come out of the box. So it all starts with information, but then what really makes it cognitive search, right? Because you could have all of these connectors to all of the right data sources, but if you don't have intelligence, you don't have cognitive search. And cognitive search is fundamentally powered by different AI technologies like machine learning. So you have to look at the platform and you have to look at what are the machine learning techniques that it's using. And the first step in doing that is finding personalized information, is to understand the user's intent and their context. So if a Google ad drives a customer to your site, you might have some information. You might know what they were searching for. And that is part of the context, right? And you can use that. But what if you do know this customer or you don't know this customer, or understanding that customer's intent, like what they're shopping for? Are they shopping for motorcycle safety equipment? So you will get hints by how they're driven to the site, but you might get hints by what they're searching for in the site and what their click path as well. And a good cognitive search engine will use AI technologies to make a determination on the user's intent. Why? Because then that will determine the relevancy. So to offer that relevant information, it has to look in all of that content, and it has to return results that not only are relevant to what they're looking for, but also relevant and hyper-personalized to that customer. The other thing to look for on the intelligence side is it should support multiple query modes. I mentioned earlier that most people think of a search engine as returning a list of results. But there's some interfaces, like a chat interface, by the way, that you want it to have a single answer to the question. And that's another thing. If you're thinking about a chat experience on your digital commerce site, which almost every digital commerce site either has one or is thinking about it, how is that going to find the content? How is it going to answer questions? A lot of those systems are FAQ-based, which is fine, because if you have FAQs, then by all means return it. But what if you can't answer that question? What if they're looking at a large corpus of product or services data? Put cognitive search on the back end of that chat interface as well. So the way cognitive search works is that it also has to learn from every user interaction to automatically create and tune relevancy for the queries and for the individual. So the intelligence section is sort of critical to all of this, because if you want it to be relevant and hyper-personalized, then you need that intelligence in the platform. So when you're looking at a cognitive search solution, this is right from the criteria that we use in the Wave. Look for the technology it uses to determine intent, to determine relevancy, the types of queries it can return, and very importantly is auto-tuning. I mean, if there's one fundamental principle of artificial intelligence, is that it can get smarter with every interaction with more data. So look for a platform that truly does that. Now, the other thing that's incredibly important here is operations, management of the platform. So cognitive search solutions are not perfect. Artificial intelligence is not perfect. We are not perfect, right? And so sometimes we need help. Now, think of a specific situation, a digital commerce situation. You're going to have a sale. Well, how does the cognitive search engine know that you're going to have, a very large 4th of July sale? It doesn't really know that. Or does it know that you have some inventory that you're trying to unload because you have something new? It doesn't really know that. So operations in a cognitive search engine lets you override what it's learned in certain situations. So for example, you may want to alter the results. You may want to override the cognitive search engine. When someone's searching for a certain type of item, you may want to override it and make the item that you're trying to move on the top of the list, right, versus what it's learned over time. So when you're looking at a cognitive search system, you have to look for usage analytics to let you measure the success of the results, but you also have to have manual tuning tools that will let you, in the search business, it's called boost or bury. So boost means move results up, and the example I gave is a classic result. You're trying to move some inventory, and so you want it to come at the top of the list no matter what. So cognitive search platforms that say, oh, it's hands off, it's just hands free. That's fine. You can use it that way, but you are going to want a sophisticated tooling to be able to manually tune the results for the specific digital commerce situation. So look for the tuning tools, because that is generally what separates the more mature platforms from the less mature platforms. So look for a tool that provides both of those, usage analytics, how is it working, how well is it working, and also the manual tuning tools. Now, the manual tuning tools, remember I said you're also looking for auto-tuning tools as well. So this is just to override things that are situational. Now, cognitive search should be embedded. It's going to be embedded in your digital commerce application or platform. And many of the vendors have pre-built applications or solution accelerators that can create cognitive search applications. You shouldn't think of search as just the Google text box. Way more sophisticated. Sometimes you do preemptive searches or proactive searches, and if you're, for example, have a section of your website where you want recommendations. Cognitive search is a recommendation engine. Can be a recommendation engine for products. You can do a behind-the-scenes search of like items, for example, right, and then display those. So you have to look for a platform that has the tools to be able to either integrate using a simple RESTful API, some sort of software development kit to integrate it within applications. And many of them actually have visual development tools that actually let business people, or in this case, maybe digital commerce business analysts or web developers, to create those custom applications, full-blown applications. So you have to infuse cognitive search in the application to get the benefit. Now, another very important category, and I wanted to say it's the most important category, but actually they all are. But if you're specifically looking to scale a digital commerce site, digital commerce, that's your lifeblood. It cannot go down. It cannot have bugs. The architecture has to be solid enterprise architecture that can scale to millions of customers, because if that goes down, the business goes down. Can you imagine an e-commerce site where you can't find products or search for products? And when you're using cognitive search, you're using it a lot more for that. So look for deployment models that allow you to deploy it on-premise, because that's the real reality of some enterprises. And on-premise can also mean a colo facility as well. Every enterprise wants a cloud option, and think even about edge, right? Because there's no reason why cognitive search can't be used in a kiosk or some other shopping experience that isn't a traditional mobile or web experience. It also has to be it has to have an architecture, a distributed architecture that scales. The thing about this market, which I've been covering for a long time, is that a lot of the early vendors in this had sort of a single server architecture. You cannot scale with a single server architecture. It doesn't work. You're going to reach you cannot scale up in today's world, you have to have a distributed, a scale-out architecture. And scaling is very tricky because it's not, if you ask a vendor and you say, oh, can you scale? Oh, yes, we have hundreds of terabytes, or we have a customer with a petabyte. Okay, that's one form of scale. That's that they can scale in terms of data. But what about concurrency? And concurrency means, the number of people hitting it, how many search requests. So, scaling search is not as simple as you may think. You have to look at both the ability to handle users, the ability to ingest data as it changes, and the ability to support a sheer amount of data. So, it's pretty tricky actually. And if it, obviously it has to have high availability as well, because if it's not going to run, then businesses shut down. Now, cognitive search is AI-powered search, and if there's one thing we know about AI, there's few other areas of technology that are undergoing rapid innovation. So you have to look for platforms that are keeping up with that level of innovation as well. A lot of the innovation in AI is happening in the open source community, or it makes its way into the open source community. So of course, when you think of open source search, Apache Solr is sort of a key project there. Elasticsearch also exists, but it's a little more of a less enterprisey. It's more about technical log search. And then in the machine learning space, Google has open source TensorFlow. There's scikit-learn. I could go on. I mean, there's a list of dozens. Now, if the vendors are not keeping up with the innovation, that's a problem because you're not going to have the latest techniques. Now, one thing to understand about the open source, it tends to be really basic, though. So it tends to do one thing really well. Like, for example, TensorFlow will do one model, but it doesn't put everything together. And that's why when we do our waves, even when I do waves on machine learning, it's commercial vendors that bring the value prop together with all of these tools, like the other ones I mentioned, like operations, scalability, et cetera. So definitely look for how the vendors leverage open source. So the wave, and that's sort of a summary of some of the criteria what to look for. All of this will power digital commerce. And again, it's not just about finding what a customer types in, but it's understanding who that customer is and then making the most appropriate match to convert that customer. Again, a perfect example, I think, is you might actually have two different product descriptions or two different images. Which product description do I show this customer? Which image is more relevant to this customer? And even searching for offers or not displaying offers can all be powered and driven by cognitive search. Use cognitive search. We think it will lead to more conversions and therefore more wallet share. And look at the vendors in this wave. We did this wave earlier this year. We've done it a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of movement. This is a very, very active space, and there's a lot of movement by all the vendors. So I hope this was helpful in understanding what cognitive search is and how to use it to hyper-personalize digital commerce at scale. And with that, I thank you. And I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was fantastic. We've got some great questions coming in, so thank you to the participants that are sending those. Let's go to questions, but right before we go to questions, I want to let everybody know about our conference coming up, hosted by Lucidworks. It's Activate. It'll be in Washington, D.C. So this is a great opportunity, a great event to hear more real-world examples of some of the benefits that Mike was talking about in terms of the technology. How are digital commerce and digital workplace leaders really benefiting from some of these technological innovations that are coming from open source, from AI, et cetera. So I wanted to make you aware of that. And also, you can see the pink box, register by July 26th, and you save $400 off the registration. And that is active right now, but ends in about a month. So, okay. Let me go to questions. And remember, you can add more questions in the Q&A. I'm seeing some great ones coming. Mike, a lot of these questions are about adoption. So one I'm seeing is, what are the most common stumbling blocks to adopting cognitive search that you see at companies you work with?
Well, so I'd say there's two. So one is the use case, just really understanding the use case and how it fits into a particular business process. We focus this webinar on digital commerce. So, the whole thing is about how to apply it to that use case. But many enterprises sort of struggle with finding, well, what is the best use case? Now, a lot of people just think of search as, okay, well, this is just my intranet search. And cognitive search is a great solution for that as well. But more and more companies are starting to look at cognitive search for more use cases. Digital commerce is one, but there's other, like life sciences, for research scientists, there's financial services use cases, customer service, and even as a engine behind a chatbot. So use cases is one. In the actual implementation, like getting it in and doing it, a lot of the challenges have to do with acquiring the data sources. And, cognitive search vendors, they're going to say, oh, yeah, we have these connectors, and it's real easy to bring the data in. And it is. But when you're at a big company, getting permission, getting security and going through all of the processes to say, okay, I can connect to that data. So technically not a challenge, but sometimes we hear that it's sort of a organizational challenge to have everyone sign off on the right data sources.
And this is my question following up on that. What are some best ways to overcome those organizational challenges? What have you seen that's worked particularly well? Mike? Still there?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I was on mute. So it's a little bit different if it's cloud or on-premise. Cloud actually is a little bit easier if the data sources are already in the cloud, because everyone's already gone through the process of security and what data is there. And so generally we hear it's easier to connect if it's in the cloud because it's already sort of been vetted. If it's on-premise, then you have to figure out, well, how are we going to get that? How are we going to secure that data? Right? Security has already been thought about in the cloud. And behind the firewall, you might think, oh, well, it's behind the firewall. I'm talking about the largest of companies where it's the biggest challenge. Now, I think if the use case is more focused, like we're talking about here, digital commerce, I think it's a lot easier because it's one thing to say, I want to connect to 100 different data sources for many different use cases versus saying, I want to connect to 8 or 12, and it's all digital commerce. So the channels and the approvals are more focused on a specific use case, making it much easier.
Great. Here's another one about data scientists. The question was, how do data scientists interact with cognitive search technologies?
Oh, wow. I should have mentioned something on this. So one of the nice things about, it's like I always say, look, the fastest way to implement AI, like in the organization, is to actually acquire a cognitive search platform because it has AI built in for the use cases we're talking about, the search use cases. But it's hands off. You don't need a data scientist team. So that's one answer. One answer is, the nice thing about this is that you've got AI built in and you can use it out of the box. However, the second part of this answer is, well, what if there's like a really specific need? So let me just give you an example. One of these might be document classification, right? You want to ingest documents into the search engine, and you want to classify them. So you want to use some sort of AI model to say, oh, well, this is a customer complaint. This is a new product request. This is a service problem, right? So you may want to, that might be a very custom model. Some of the cognitive search engines might have, that's known as sentiment analysis. They may have a model, but if they don't, then a data science team could build a model, Python or TensorFlow or any of these libraries I mentioned. And so you want to look for a cognitive search engine that can import those models, and many of them can. It's one of the things we measured in the Wave. So data scientists are not needed to implement this, but data scientists certainly can enhance the value if the cognitive search platform can import models that they create outside the platform.
Mike, here's another one focusing, I guess, more specifically again on e-commerce and digital commerce. How does cognitive search help merchandisers?
So how does cognitive search help merchandisers in terms of
I shortened it a little bit from what was written in, but I think the question was more at how it changes the work they do or benefits the work that they do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where you look at the usage analytics in the operations section, because usage analytics shows you what people are looking for, what they find, and when they convert, right? So if you sort of mash up the cognitive search usage analytics with your e-commerce platform's analytics, then you can see what people buy together. You can see what items are popular, what they aren't. So I assume by merchandising, they mean, okay, how do I figure out what my product mix is, what products I should configure under different taxonomies and things like that. So I think the search usage analytics is information about what customers are looking for and the path that they take to look for it. So I think usage analytics is the answer there.
Great. Here's another one. I think it's referencing the slide about instore. The question was, what are some good ways that companies are using cognitive search to improve in-store experiences? Or I'll add my add-on question. Is that happening? Do you see that crossover from digital to brick and mortar, and how does what part does cognitive search play in that?
Yeah, so I'll give you if you look at when Amazon opens its stores, like Amazon Go, how do you figure out in a low footprint store what to stock, right, and what to be available? There's no way you can do that if you also don't have an online presence and you can't do analytics on that presence. So I don't think the full answer here is cognitive search, but cognitive search is an input. What are people looking for? But you also have to know, well, what are they buying as well? Because that can help you determine what to stock in a particular store, in a particular location. But for some stores, like large, sort of I don't want to name them, but they're sort of an upscale department store. When they know who the customer is and when they're identified in the store, they also have access to what they were looking for online. And so the salesperson in that particular interaction, if it's not an anonymous reaction, not an anonymous interaction, they can know what has been top of mind from the online experience through their search.
Okay, thanks, Mike. One more question, and then I think we can we'll wrap it up. How far along are digital commerce companies in adopting cognitive search? How early in this process are most companies versus further along?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the native internet giants, the Amazons and the, even the Newegg's and those digital natives online, they're very sophisticated with cognitive search and using machine learning in general. Overstock.com, for example. But I think a lot of smaller, maybe mid-size, and maybe retailers that have an online presence, they're very focused on getting the catalog, getting the e-commerce experience, getting all of that right, and they believe that search is just a text box. They believe it's just a text box, and when they're looking for a platform, they just say, "Oh, I need search," but they're not thinking about it as cognitive search. They're thinking about it as one tool. They're not thinking about it as something that can lead to conversions. They think of it as something where someone can find something. So I think it's fairly immature. It's very mature in the giants, but I think it's very immature in the rest of retailers with an online presence.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thanks for all the attendees sending in great questions. Mike, before we close, I know we're planning on doing another webinar with you in the near future, focusing more on digital workplace type solutions. Do you want to give a call out for some of the themes that we'll be covering on that one, and then we'll wrap?
Sure. So when we think of the digital workplace, we're talking about the employees in a company who need to find information. And we do surveys of companies, and we find that I think it was 55% or 50-something% of knowledge workers spend half their time looking for information. That's a lot of time, and I think people would anecdotally understand that. So the digital workplace is about reducing that time, finding what they're looking for, but also finding a complete answer, because a lot of people make a decision based upon the search results, but you may be making a decision based upon not a complete picture. So, they say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Well, the whole truth is very important, because if you make a decision based upon the partial truth, so we're going to talk about how cognitive search provides complete and quick access to all of the information and the answers for knowledge workers. But we're also going to talk about how it can be used within specific domains within a company as well. So look forward to that.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for all the attendees. Look for that future webinar that we'll be doing together. Also, if you have friends or colleagues that weren't able to join, we will be posting a blog post with the recording of this webinar and a summary of some of the questions and answers that Mike gave. Thanks again, Mike. Thanks to all attendees, and that concludes today's webinar.